After listening to the CEO of India's largest private bank, we stay with the theme of money for our next session. But perhaps its color is about to change, from white to black. That's because our next speaker is the author of The Black Economy in India, published by Penguin, which has broken new ground in thinking about the Indian economy and its development. In fact, our speaker too has changed track, from physics to economics. He has been teaching economics at the Jawaharlal Nehru University since 1984. But we hear that his students even now get an occasional dose of physics during his economics lectures. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first thematic presentation of CEO Track 2011, please welcome Chairperson of the Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU, Professor Arun Kumar.
Thank you very much for having me here in your midst to speak on this esoteric topic, but perhaps very timely, because this is now something that everybody is concerned with, especially with the movement that's going on in Delhi. Let me plunge straight into the subject, and I'll start with a few preliminaries. What I'm going to say is based on my book, which Penguin had brought out in 1999, The Black Economy in India, which I wrote. And what I want to do is begin by arguing that we are like the seven blind men and the elephant. Somebody touches the legs of the elephant and says it's the pillar of a building, somebody touches the tail and says it's the broom, and so on and so forth. So depending on our perspective, we think of the black economy very differently. And that is why if I'm an NGO, I look upon the black economy in one way. If I'm a financial analyst, I look upon it in a different way. And therefore, what we need to do is we need to look at the black economy holistically. And let me suggest that some of the analysis is quite counterintuitive. What we think is not the reality. What we think is the reality turns out not to be correct. And that's why let me try and clarify by looking at the analytics of it. So the first point I make is there's a tremendous confusion in the literature, in the popular literature, because people refer to it as the black economy or black incomes or black money or corruption. They use it synonymously. Actually, that's not true. These things stand for different things. And that's why I'll come back to this issue of what we are thinking of as corruption is only one aspect of the black economy. The second is, some say that the size does not matter, and I'd like to show that the size does matter. So therefore, we need to look at what is the size of the black economy. Finally, one of the preliminaries is that the remedy requires identifying the correct cause. If we do not know the correct cause, then whatever action we take may turn out to be futile, and we may not be able to resolve the problem. So whether the Lokpal bill will solve the problem, as some people say it may not solve the problem, some people argue it will, it will depend on our analysis whether this would actually indeed be the case. So we have to be analytical. We cannot be anecdotal. We can't worry about why VP Singh fell out with Rajiv Gandhi or what happened in the 2G spectrum case alone and not look at the wider picture. That's being anecdotal. We need to be actually analytical. Now, black economy is bigger than corruption because black economy involves illegality of various kinds, and a bribe may or may not be paid in all cases, whereas corruption would involve paying a bribe. So black economy turns out to be much bigger, as I've discussed in my book. And another aspect that needs clarity is that we think of corruption as public sector corruption. But the black economy involves both the private sector and the public sector. It is not just a product. So there's a book by Cowell, a professor in London School of Economics in 1990, which showed that it's a joint product of the private sector and the public sector, and not just in the public sector alone. So when we refer to the black economy as black money, what is clear is that it's only a tiny part of the total black economy. It is that part of the black savings which have been saved in cash. But black savings themselves are only 50% of the black economy, and black money may be only 10% of the black savings. So in that sense, what is black money may be only 5% of the total black economy. So we can't refer to the black economy as black money. That is very clear. Now, black savings take on very many different forms, which are not just cash. which are assets which are undervalued, inventories that may be undervalued, flight of capital from the country, investments in legal and illegal activities. So in other words, black savings go into a variety of channels and not just black money. Black money is only one tiny part of the issue. What is the impact of the black economy? Black economy today has engulfed the entire elite section of society, as recent scams suggest, whether it be army men, whether it be chief justices of the country, whether it be bureaucrats, whether it be politicians, whether it be doctors or lawyers or teachers, the entire elite section of society is engulfed in the black economy. And therefore, it has a major impact on the rest of the economy. Now, black economy raises the savings rate of the economy, but it makes the investment rate fall. Some people argue that if the black economy is, say, 50% of GDP, then if we multiply everything by 1.5, we'll be all right. But what this suggests is that while savings rate rises, the investment rate falls, so we cannot multiply everything by 1.5 and get our calculus right. We need to look at the different institutional practices and look at it, and then only we can solve it. For instance, the input-output ratio of the economy rises. Why? Because we use the inputs and overvalue them, and we use the output and undervalue it, so the input-output ratio rises. And input-output ratio is required in the planning exercise. It is required by industry. It is required by various other analysts. And if our input-output ratios are incorrect, then the planning for the future goes wrong. Similarly, the incremental capital output ratio rises. And once again, therefore, the rate of growth and the other macro variables are affected adversely by rise of the incremental capital output ratio. What it suggests is that capital is inefficiently utilized. And because it is inefficiently utilized, what happens is that the rate of growth of the economy becomes less than what potentially it could be. So there are four rates of growth of the economy: the actual rate of growth of the economy, the white rate of growth of the economy, the black rate of growth of the economy, and the potential rate of growth of the economy. So what can be shown is the potential rate of growth of the economy is 5% more than the white economy's rate of growth. So you have the white economy's rate of growth and the black economy's rate of growth, which is higher than the white, and the weighted average of the two is the actual rate of growth of the economy. But the potential rate of growth is even higher. And why? Because capital is inefficiently utilized in the economy. So India has been losing 5% rate of growth, and what is the consequence? Look at this graph. The blue graph is the way the economy has proceeded from 69-70. And the pink graph is the potential growth of the economy. So in other words, today the Indian economy could have been 8 times larger than what it is. So we could have been a $9 trillion economy if the black economy had not existed. And instead of having a per capita income of about $900, our economy could have been at $7,500 of per capita income. So instead of being one of the poorest 30 countries in the world, we could have been a middle income country and larger than China, second in the world. And therefore the weight in the international affairs would have been much higher. So in other words, if we are able to solve the problem of the black economy, potentially, say in the next 10 years, our rate of growth would rise dramatically, and we would be a much faster growing economy and a much larger economy. And I will show that we would have a higher rate because policy failure is associated with the black economy, and if the black economy is resolved, then policy failure would be far less. So let's look at some other impact. The black economy generates employment, no doubt, but it lowers the actual amount of employment that can be generated. So please don't get me wrong that the black economy does not generate output and employment. It does generate output, it does generate employment. But if it was not there, there would be far more employment and far more output. Okay? So therefore the employment potential would be higher. Now, black economy raises costs everywhere because there are cuts that are taken out, there are ways of siphoning out money, there are black premia and so on. So the inflation rate is much higher than it could be. So all the calculation of the Reserve Bank and others would change if the black economy changed. The inflationary potential would come down, and therefore the interest rate policies, etc., would be very different. Similarly, the fiscal crisis of the state. We are constantly short of resources. We are running a fiscal deficit of about 3.5 to 4 lakh crores of rupees. But if the black economy had been tackled, then at today's rates of taxes, we could have raised an additional 15 lakh crores of rupees. So instead of having a deficit of 3.5 lakh crores, we would have had a surplus in the budget of 11.5 lakh crores, and therefore we could have put in a lot more money into education, into health, into infrastructure like power and various other things. So that's it. Then the balance of payment difficulties are very high. Because associated with the black economy are the capital flight, associated with it is trade mispricing, therefore exports and imports would have been very different, current account balance would be very different, and therefore the entire macro scenario would have been completely different. And therefore, if we don't take the black economy into account, we cannot understand some of these things. Development is adversely affected, because if you take education, we were supposed to reach targets by 1965 of having all children in schools, but schools either are on paper in the rural areas, or schools are there but teachers are not there, or if teachers are there, facilities are not there, therefore literacy targets are not met, the quality of education is very poor, and therefore development fails. Development also fails in a variety of other ways like health, drinking water, malnourishment and various other things, because money that is sent from the government does not reach the ground, and if it does not reach the ground, it does not have. So as was said by Mr. Chidambaram 4 years back, expenditures don't lead to outcomes. So you have shortage of funds in the budget, and whatever funds in the budget you have, they are inadequately spent or they are misspent, and therefore outcomes are not there. That's why India is faced with large-scale policy failure and gives a picture as if it is a failing state which is not able to achieve targets, as if the will of the central government doesn't run beyond Ghaziabad, maybe not even in Delhi today. So therefore, there's a large governance deficit. Governance is very poor, especially in the backward states. Associated with the black economy is criminalization in society, which is growing, especially among the youth, and that is creating other social problems, as if I have time, I will refer to. One of the key characterizations that I have given in my book is that the black economy is like digging holes and filling them. So, what is digging holes and filling them? It's like activity without productivity. So you make a road, don't use adequate material, it breaks down, you remake it. So rather than making new roads, we are repairing the same road. You have teachers going to school, not teaching well, so that they can do tuition. So the child has to spend an hour in the school and then an hour outside in tuition. So this is like digging holes and filling holes, and therefore the productivity of capital is lowered as a result of that. The second characterization I make is that it makes the usual the unusual, and the unusual becomes the usual. What does it mean? That which should happen does not, and that which should not happen keeps happening. So you should get 220-volt electricity ideally, but you'll get 170 or 270, your equipment would burn out, and therefore you need additional stabilizers and other power equipment and more maintenance than is required. Similarly, water in the tap should be clean, but all of us have to carry bottled water, because we spend money on cleaning up water and providing pipelines, but the water is not clean, so we spend additional money on cleaning it up through RO systems and various other systems. So in other words, various kinds of inefficiencies are associated with the black economy. And what happens is that the citizen gets tired of fighting the lack of implementation of laws in various places, so instead of fighting it, you join in. So large number of people join in. Wherever you can make black incomes, you make black incomes. So one important point is that the black incomes are much larger than the output which is not declared. So on a 10% evasion of output, you can double your profits, because the entire cost of that output falls on the white. And therefore the revenue of the evaded output becomes a profit. So balance sheet profit and off-balance sheet profit can equal each other, and that's why if the black economy is 50% of GDP, it does not mean that 50% of the output is not declared. If the 10% of the output is not declared, you can generate a 50% black economy. So this is something that we need to look at it. Another impact which is very important is that there's been massive flight of capital with very high opportunity cost since independence. Now, Global Financial Integrity report has come out in November 2010, which showed that $462 billion have been lost. But as the report indicates, this is only a very partial analysis, because neither hawala nor narcotic drug trafficking nor smuggling and other such activities are incorporated into the study. If you correct for all that and you correct for a few other things, then the opportunity cost to the economy would have been roughly about a couple of $1 trillion of capital from 1948 to the present, which means that industry could have been at least 3 to 4 times larger than it is. And the opportunity cost of that is enormous. So therefore, development is set back. Then, in a capital short country, capital has been going out, so therefore, the capital shortage has increased. Another important aspect of the black economy is that it's concentrated in the hands of at most 3% of the population. So, this 50% of GDP of black is concentrated in the hands of 3%, and therefore disparities are far higher than they should be. Now, people ask that India is supposed to be a poor country, with the 2004-5 National Sample Survey indicating that 77% of India lives at less than 20 rupees per day, 96% lives at less than 48 rupees per day, and 99% lives at less than 80 rupees per day. And then, how do you have such consumption? How do you see this large consumption that is taking place? And that is because 3% of India has large black incomes, which they can spend very freely, and because they spend very freely, therefore you see this consumerism, whether in terms of automobiles, in terms of plasma televisions, and various other goodies that you see. And 3% of India is 36 million people. So nested in this 1.2 billion is a 36 million in India, which is spending freely. And it is this 36 million which is showing the consumerism. And this 36 million is equal to or larger than most European countries. Okay? That's why this 36 million is substantial, even though for a 1.2 billion countries it's only 3%. Right? So that's why inequality and inequity, if we have to understand, we have to bring the black economy into account. And bulk of the population is living in very uncivilized conditions with pollution and with low growth, and the 3% is the one that is enjoying the fruits of this development. Now, it has a very strong impact on the monetary sector. We just had a talk from the monetary sector, but the important aspect is that we still have a very large informal money market. So there's a large informal liquidity which is associated with the black economy. And this black liquidity is outside the control of the central bank, and that's why the central bank is unable to control inflation very well. Because when, say, the onion prices last year rose by a factor of 300%, and if you were speculating an onion, you could get a 10,000% rate of return in an annual sense. At that point, black liquidity floods in. Even if the RBI tries to tighten monetary policy, tries to raise interest rates, that will not come under control. So informal money markets and the black economy have an impact on the money multiplier, on the velocity of circulation, and the stability of the money multiplier and the velocity of circulation. And that is why the monetary policy does not achieve the results that it could achieve. If the black economy was smaller, the RBI's policies would work much better than they do. Let me come to the question of the size of the black economy, because I've been giving you implications without actually going into the size of the black economy. Professor Caldor from Cambridge came in 1955 and estimated the size of black economy then to be 4 to 5% of GDP. Vanchu Committee in 1970 estimated it to be 7% of GDP for 1969-70. NIPFP, I was a member of that study for Central Board of Direct Taxes. We estimated it to be 18 to 21% of GDP for 1980-81. And then I estimated in this black economy book, my estimate for 95-96 was 40% of GDP, of which 8% came from illegal activities like narcotic drugs, like criminal activities, and so on, and 32% from legal activities. So bulk of the black income is generated in legal activities like construction, agriculture, and so on and so forth. Now that estimate has gone up to 50% of GDP. So roughly this year, with 79 lakh crores of GDP, we will be generating about 39 lakh crores of black incomes. This is not a stock figure. This is the annual flow of income. So please don't confuse it with the stock figure. The black income generation encompasses all sectors of the economy, but bulk of it is generated in the tertiary sector. So tertiary sector, perhaps 100% is black income generation on top of what is declared. And that is whether in the hotel business, the retail business, whether it is in finance, whether it is in professional services, and various other such activities that lie in the tertiary sector. So tertiary sector is the major generator of black incomes in the economy. So as a result, the entire sectoral balance of the economy is different. If you take the black plus the white economy, agriculture is only 9%, not 15% as in the white economy. Secondary sector would be roughly about 15%, and the balance, about say 76%, would be in the tertiary sector. So the entire balance of the economy is different from what it is in the white economy, and therefore the investment climate and the various other factors are impacted by this sectoral balances. Now, one indicator of the growing size, in my black economy book, I have given the major scams on the front pages of the newspapers between 1955, 56, and 1996. There was one major scam in the 50s, one in the 60s, two in the 70s, 8 in the 80s, and 26 between 91 and 96. Okay? So it's growing exponentially. Secondly, the largest scam up to 1991 was Bofors at 64 crores. But between 91 and 96, the largest was Harshad Mehta scam, estimated by Janki Raman Committee at 3,128 crores. But there were 13 scams of above 1,000 crores, like the sugar scam and the fertilizer scam and so on. So in other words, not only the number of scams increasing, but per scam, the amount of money involved is also exponentially increasing. A PhD student of mine, he has been estimating it recently, and he looked at the figures for 2005 to 2008, and there were 150 major scams in this 3-year period. That means now we are having 50 scams, almost one per week, which is coming out in the headlines. And now we are talking about 10,000 crores and 1 lakh crores. So in other words, the number of scams is exploding, and the per scam, the amount of money involved is exploding, and that is what is underlying the rapid increase in the black economy size. Now, for the black economy size to be 50% of GDP, it implies that 50% of economic activity has some illegality associated with it. Now, how can illegality be associated with such a large part of the economy? It has to be both systematic and systemic. It is a system. It's not anecdotal. It's not accidental. So if I work out a system of encroachment, then right from the day that I get my plan sanctioned, the architect is involved, he knows where to bribe, what to do, etc. So tax evasion is a system. How you do it? You build a system through your chartered accountant, through the income tax lawyer, and various other mechanisms. So in other words, black economy involves systematic violation of the laws. And today our elite is lawless, whether we jump traffic lights, we violate environmental rules, whether we violate other rules, it is now a very systematic matter. How can this be systematic? How can violation of rules be systematic? Only when the policy maker is involved in it, those who are implementers are involved in it, and those who are doing it involved in it. So this triad consists of the corrupt political class, the corrupt executive, and the corrupt political class. These three together are involved in the black economy's generation, and they are the primary drivers of the black economy. It does not mean that some small peon or somebody else may be also generating some 10,000, 20,000 rupees per month of black income. But one Madhu Koda will equal all this 2 lakhs of the 4th grade class employees in the entire central government. We are not talking about 4,000 or 5,000 crores. We are talking about 39 lakh crores of black income every year. So therefore, the scale at which it is operating is, as I said, concentrated in the hands of 3%, and the corrupt executive consists of the corrupt police, the corrupt bureaucracy, and the judiciary. And I, for my book, interviewed 14 members of parliament who successfully fought the 1998 election. They were good friends, and they gave me the actual election expenditure data, which is contained in the book without the names. And I asked them, what did you spend on transport? What did you spend on meetings? What did you spend on various other things? And they spent an average of 1.29 crores when the election expenditure limit was 15 lakhs of rupees. And bulk of the expenditure was on illegal activity like hiring goons, protecting yourself, financing alternate candidates, bribing in the last 3 days with various other kind of activities. So even if you had state funding of election, that could only be to the limit of 15 lakh, would be a chicken feed compared to what was being spent. And those figures have gone up by a factor of at least 10 after that. So therefore, this will not work. Interesting thing about that data also is that who was financing the election? And the corrupt politicians were being financed by the corrupt bureaucrats, the corrupt police, the corrupt judiciary, the businessmen, the local businessmen, and the big businessmen. So I have the data on who was financing how much of each of these MPs thing, and this comes out that this is how the triad gets formed. Now, the criminal has entered the nexus after 1983. According to B.D. Kumar's book of 1990, he argues that from 1983, when the smugglers were given amnesty, the criminals have started entering the nexus. So either the businessman is a criminal or the politician is a criminal, and that's why legislations now have large number of criminals entering it. So large number of legislators now have criminal records, they have cases going on against them, and that's why the rule of law has weakened, and that has promoted the criminalization in society. Now, as the rule of law has weakened, we can give examples. In 1984, we interviewed all commissioners of income tax when we were doing the CBDT study, and the average that they gave was that 95% of our department is corrupt. That figure perhaps has moved to 99.9% today. Okay, very few probably are left who are still honest. In 2002, in the MCD, in the Delhi High Court, the MCD was scolded by the judge saying, why are you not able to stop illegal construction in scenic farms? And the MCD's reply through the lawyer was, sir, we don't have one single honest engineer left in our PWD department. So how do we stop it? So you can see the scale at which this kind of a thing has gone on. What does it imply for the nature of laws, for the rule of law in the country? Laws on paper differ from as they are implemented. So they're systematically subverted. Any society needs rules to function by, otherwise we'll have the Jungle Raj. And Jungle Raj may be okay for the short period, but not for the long period sustenance of a society, because you need to function by certain rules and laws. If you don't do that, there'll be problem. So no perfect laws are feasible. A law is a law both on paper and in spirit. If the spirit is not willing, we'll find loopholes and we'll find ways of subverting. And that's why what has happened is that if you look at the Income Tax Act of 1960-61, you find it relatively simple. Loopholes were found, they were plugged. More loopholes were found, they were plugged. And therefore the laws became very complex. And now we're talking about the direct tax code to simplify the rules once again. But complexity of laws is used to generate more black income. So it becomes like a chicken and egg problem. Where do you begin? So the complexity has not helped us. Now, what has not worked? We have tried any number of things, but it's all piecemeal. And piecemeal will not work. So we've had dozens of committees and commissions from 48 looking at the different aspects of the black economy. So we go back to 48, come to Caldor Committee of 55, 56, come to Santhanam Committee of 64, Vanchu Committee of 1969-70, Dagli Committee of 1978, LK Jha Committee, PC Alexander Committee, and there are a host of committees looking at different aspects of black income generation. And they made thousands of suggestions. It's not 1, 2, 5. Vanchu Committee is rich with suggestions. Thousands of suggestions, and hundreds of them have been implemented. For instance, we have lowered the tax rate. As you know, when Mrs. Gandhi was the finance minister in 1971, the highest marginal tax rate was 97.5%. It has come down to 32%. That time the black economy was 7%, now it's gone up to 50%. So tax rates have come down, black economy has increased. After 1991, MRTP is gone, licensing is gone, small-scale reservation has been diluted, any number of things have been done, but size of black economy continues to grow. Voluntary disclosure schemes, 6 schemes, but the 1999 CAG report on VDIS 1997 said, honest people are becoming dishonest and people are becoming habitual tax offenders because the same people declared their income in the earlier 5 schemes and then also in the 6th scheme. So it became a mechanism of generating black and now legalizing it. Acquisition of undervalued properties and hundreds of other things have been done. So it's not that we have not done things, but in spite of that, the black economy has continued to grow. The reason is, problem is not narrowly technical. It's not simply by changing tax rate or by changing controls we'll be able to resolve the problem, because if the triad underlies the problem, then it's a political question. It's a lack of political will. The very people who are in power are generating that black income, and therefore implementation of rules is always going to be lax without public accountability. So it is this lack of will. And you can see that, for instance, Hawala. Politicians use the Hawala. In the Jain Hawala case, large number of politicians came. They know where it's operating from Chandni Chowk. They know where it's operating from the farmhouses in the outskirts of Delhi. If they want, they can catch these people in a go. But they are not done. Therefore, there's private information with the rulers, but that does not become public information for action. And that's why the black economy is not getting controlled. Large number of cases are waiting to come out from the closets. Now, we have seen in the case of Radia tapes how this triad gets formed, and a lot of information exists. And now we know that 1 lakh telephones were being tapped, and under the RTO, this secret agency, they have claimed that 7.5 lakh telephones are tapped. Therefore, roughly information exists about large number of politicians, about various other things. What is this intelligence used for? It is used for blackmail rather than for solving the problem of black economy. And that's why at the right time, the screws can be tightened on Mayawati or around Mulayam Singh Yadav, but not to control the black economy or the black income that they are generating. And here, I'd like to make the point that honesty has to be indivisible and systemic. It cannot be that I'm financially honest, but politically and socially I tolerate all the corruption that's going on around me. That's not accountability. So honesty has to be absolutely indivisible. And it's the lack of democracy in political parties where the top man is in charge and it cannot filter down. These people, when they come to power, they're not going to promote democracy. Corruption cases are knowingly spoiled. If you look at the recent big cases, Hassan Ali case started in 2007, no action in 2010. The finance minister says now $8 billion have disappeared. He's not going to keep the money for years just to be caught at the right time. Similarly, the 2G spectrum case started in 2007-8 and now not much action took place except in 2010 when the Supreme Court took hold of the case. Liechtenstein disk case started in November 2007. The German government offered the Liechtenstein disk, but we did not take it till the Supreme Court intervened, and then only we started investigating. So deliberately the courts have been saying that the investigative agencies have been spoiling the cases. Contrast this with the Birkenfeld case, UBS case in the USA, where on very small bit of information, Birkenfeld was caught, UBS was fined $750 billion, and 4,500 names were obtained from the UBS of the Americans having accounts there. So when you want to act in a country, you can act. If you don't want to act, you will not act. So cases are deliberately spoiled, information is deliberately spoiled in our case. So I'm running out of time. I think I've already taken more time. So let me conclude. Black economy has very high cost to society. These costs are both direct and indirect. So for instance, inflation is higher, policy failure is there, development is slower, and so on. And how can you check it? Because black economy operates in secrecy. So transparency and accountability is very important, and this must be at all levels. And that's why using the right to information, many cases information is coming out, yet it needs to be implemented much more strongly. And if it is implemented more strongly, then people will be worried about doing the wrong things. Lokpal bill is very important in this context, because Lokpal bill will introduce accountability at the top. Accountability has to filter down from the top. Accountability can't go up. So my argument is that if we have the Prime Minister and the Chief Justice of India under it, in the center, and Chief Minister and the Chief Justice of the High Court under the Lokayog and the state level, then they'll be forced to ask for accountability downwards. The Prime Minister then cannot have dishonest ministers under him, and the ministers then they demand accountability from secretaries who will demand from the additional secretaries and joint secretaries. They'll go downward. If we have everybody under the Lokpal, then you'll have a huge bureaucracy which itself will get corrupted, and therefore the entire Lokpal system will get corrupted. So therefore we need to focus and target very carefully, and if we do that, then probably we'll be able to do it. Now, because laws are not laws only on paper, therefore, like RTI, like Lokpal, movements are needed to keep them under pressure. Without that, they can also get subverted. The question is, when can such a turning point come? And we are all hoping that this movement by Anna Hazare might constitute a turning point, because now finally the middle class seems to have got fed up. And the middle class is coming out and participating in large numbers. And if that pressure can be built up, if that pressure can be sustained over a period of time, now may be the turning point. And I'd like to suggest that in Bali, Ravan never dies. Ram kills him, but he brushes himself, gets up and starts fighting. So the fight between good and evil is a constant fight. It's not that evil is defeated once for all and the good wins. That happens in our Ramayana, but not in the Bali's Ramayana. So it has to be a constant struggle. If we want to tackle the black economy, then we have to have a constant struggle. And it is in this context that I'd like to point out that we have to be realistic. Neither optimistic nor pessimistic. Unless we see the black economy as it is, we will not be able to counter it. If we say take a very pessimistic view, we'll give up. If we take an optimistic view, we need not do anything. So we have to be realistic, and I think I tried to be realistic in my presentation, even though it might appear that things are pessimistic, but I think this is a realistic picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for that very informative discussion. I'd like to open up the session for Q&A. I'll just come to you.
Professor Kumar, thank you for that presentation. Could I just ask one question? And I'm trying to find another catalyst for a turning point, and that could be that we have all seen in the last 12 months, ministers or at least one in jail. We've seen bureaucrats in jail. We've seen public sector employees in jail, and we've seen a host of corporates in jail. And that fear of being held accountable for your activities, could that be a meaningful catalyst in turning around corruption and the whole black economy in your view?
Yeah, that's what I tried to argue, that we need accountability at all levels, whether in the private sector or the public sector. So introducing accountability will undermine the black economy, there's no doubt. But how do you get that? You see, the action by the government is in direct proportion to the action by the public. As the public raised the issue, it got picked up in the media, that together put the pressure on the courts, and the courts started acting. Otherwise, I'm in a closed door session, but judiciary is also full of corruption. The Bhushan's have accused the past 16 Chief Justices, 8 have been corrupt. Recent 2 Chief Justices both have accusation of corruption charges against them. Number of High Court judges are now being prosecuted. So it's not that corruption is not there everything, right? So it's not that it will happen automatically. Accountability cannot be simply a buzzword. Okay? Accountability has to be backed by movements, by public pressure. So public pressure is very, very essential, and that's why I see this movement on Lokpal is actually a movement against corruption, the rise of the middle class. That's more important to me whether than Lokpal gets passed immediately or after a while. As long as this pressure is sustained, I think we'll begin to have accountability both in the public sector and in the private sector, and that will see the decline of the black economy over a period of time.
Sir, the number which you are given, like 1.2 crore for funding elections, if you multiply by 500 members, and if you fund 5 members for a constituency, the cost of this funding is not more than 2,500 crore or 3,000 crore. Why can't we set that right so that everything can flow from there? If we can fund this, then the amount is not much.
Yeah. Okay. Now that was the figure for 1998 election. Assuming that has gone up by 10, factor of 10. You see, the amount that is needed for funding the election is chicken feed compared to the 39 lakh crores. Okay? So today, election maybe you need 40,000 crores because there are average of 9 candidates per constituency. There are roughly 3 to 4 serious candidates, 5 non-serious candidates. So I've given all that discussion in my book, what was happening in the 1998 election. So 40,000 crores out of 40 lakh crores is nothing. Okay, we can do that. But the point is not that. Point is that's only the time when the triad forms. But the triad will form because there are additional gains to be made, 40 lakh crores of rupees to be generated every year, right? So therefore, it is not simply a question of funding of elections. Even if you were to give state funding of election to the extent of 40,000 crores, still the picture would not change, right? Because it's the triad, as I said. This triad is the critical thing. How do you break the triad? And that triad will be broken only when accountability is introduced. And that accountability requires public pressure. Today, if Lalu Prasad Yadav can be hauled up, and then because he has to give up, he can make Rabdi Devi the chief minister, and then when he can win, his lesson is, I can do what I like. In Andhra, TDP wins, then Congress wins, then TDP wins, then Congress wins. So what is the lesson? I can be corrupt, and then next time I'll come back again. Okay, and I can continue to do that. Right? So in India, if you look at after 1975, okay, after 77, after the emergency, most governments have lost. Okay? So governments are repeatedly changed but replaced by other. So therefore the difference between one political formation and the other is that between Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Okay? And therefore the problem will not get solved if it's left only to the political parties. The point is democratization has to go down, and that is what this movement is all about. It's a democratization where people are getting up and saying, now this much and no more. They're not going to tolerate it. So public accountability is being built. Once public accountability is built, then I think things will begin to reform.
We have one question here.
So thank you for the enlightenment about this black money issue. My question is related to the awareness of accountability which you just mentioned. Do you also foresee an issue because of increases in awareness towards accountability? The bureaucracy probably may go to the other extreme or non-decisiveness, until the time we are having a strong law, which you say probably could be, may take some time. There could be a complete lack of decision making in the entire bureaucracy?
Yeah. That's a good question because you see this is a particularly difficult time for India with the global crisis and perhaps we already entered a recession and we need to tackle that, but there's a complete paralysis at the policy level, the political level, the bureaucratic level. Nobody's taking decision because they're too embroiled. So this is a particularly difficult and bad time for us. But, you know, there's no option. You can't choose in history the time when to act and when not to act. History is not in our control. So when this movement has come up at this point of time, you can't say, stop the movement, we'll do something else and then revive the movement once again. And this is not the first time a movement against corruption has come up. You go to Navnirman movement in Gujarat in 1973, the JP movement in 74. Those were both youth movements, very vibrant movements, and yet they petered out after a while. You see at the time of the Bofors, between 1989 to 1991, again there was a big movement against corruption. You see at the Harshad Mehta scam time, there was a big, halabulu in the public about this kind of thing. So movements have come. Movements have had some impact, but limited impact. This movement seems to be slightly different. This movement seems to be slightly different because various other movements are coming together. Those were single issue movements, but this movement is a broader issue movement where not only Lokpal, but RTI, right to education, right to food, etc., they are all coming together in the last 5 years. So in other words, the sustaining power of this movement is much larger. And if this movement sustains, perhaps the turnaround will begin to take place in a year or 2 years. But I agree with you, businessmen who have a certain model of policy, that model is changing and therefore business uncertainty is increasing because how to operate in the new environment, new model will be required. And that's why this has come at a bad time because investment rate in the economy is already falling, and if this uncertainty continues in the next coming year or 2 years till the turnaround begins to take place, then that will have a further effect. But my hope is, because we've been losing 5% rate of growth, if we are able to reform in the next 2 to 3 years, then in 5 to 7 to 8 years, this turnaround and 5% increase in rate of growth will begin kicking in. And if that begins to happen, imagine the potential output that we'll gain. So yes, in the short run, we'll have adverse consequences politically as well as from the business environment point of view. But in 5 to 8 years' time, if this movement is serious, is able to tackle the black economy, then we'll have a major boost to the economy. And you can imagine that if in the last 35, 40 years, we did not have the black economy, and today we were a $9 trillion economy, each one of us would be 10 times better off than what we are today. Therefore, whether it's a businessman or a man on the street, everybody would be much better off, and that is the hope with which we can go into it. And also, if your corruption levels go down, if policy making stabilizes in the coming 2 years or so, then you'll be able to deal with the global crisis which is beginning. And this global crisis may perhaps be deeper than the 2008 one because this is coming from the politics in America, politics in Europe, etc. So a deeper crisis, and we need a political response. So if political response is needed, we need strong political leadership. If we don't have that, the political response will be weak also.
Sorry, just a second question on this is, you also see a disconnect in our federal system in terms of few states doing extremely well in terms of governance. There is a huge lack of governance in some states. For example, will that be leading to migration of people or I don't know what could be the larger connotation of the whole thing?
You see, where the black economy is larger, there the governance deficit is larger, their policy implementation is larger, and therefore the rate of growth is affected adversely. So in other words, where administration is more clean, where activity is more, there the rates of growth are higher. So in other words, black economy is also led to a regional divide. So there are some economies which have done well in some states, others they have not done so well. Now, if the black economy is to be affected, then we can't have it affected in some states but not in the other states. Otherwise, the regional problem will continue to grow. So in other words, there has to be a national solution. And I see in the Anna Hazare movement a kind of a national ethos coming through. It's not as if it's taking place only in the advanced states but not in the backward states. Okay? So the impact of a movement would be a national movement. Otherwise, what has happened is that we have had a regional movement. Everybody is saying, let me do for my state, forget the bigger picture. But now, in the way the movement has been initiated in the recent months, it has a national reach. So once again, we are focusing on the national questions. And that is my hope, that this focus on the national question as opposed to the regional question will help all the states to come up, will help even the poorer states to come up and improve governance in those states.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but we'd like to thank you for your contribution today to the event, and I would request Mr. Oswal to present Professor Kumar with a token of appreciation.